Good morning. I'm really excited for an awesome panel we have this morning to continue the dialogue that we started this morning with John Martin. Please have a seat. So as Kelly mentioned, I'm Shamim Mohammad. I'm the Chief Information and Technology Officer for CarMax. CarMax, as all of you know, is a used car retailer. We're the largest used car retailer in the country. We buy, sell, finance cars. However, CarMax over the last several years has become a technology company. So it is my pleasure and honor to really have a distinguished set of speakers from different aspects of our communities and share their perspectives on the opportunities and growth and challenges and excitement that's happening right now. So first, I will introduce the speakers, and we'll keep it kind of conversational, not many slides that we have to go through. So the speakers we have on the panel here, first is President Darrell Williams. So President Williams is the president of Hampton University. He became the president of the university in 2022, 39 years after graduating from the same university. Prior to joining Hampton University, he was a senior executive of Leidos. As many of you know, when you go to the airport security, that's the device you go through, very high tech. President Williams is a retired US Army three-star general. He held many prestigious and critical roles throughout his 37-year service career. Thank you for your service, President Williams. An interesting fact about President Williams is he met his wife, Myra, while attending Hampton University, and they've been married since 1987. I'm pretty sure they didn't meet on Meta, right? Facebook that time, or maybe email, we'll see. Next, we have Tad Deriso. He's the CEO of Mid-Atlantic Broadband Communities. He's a nonprofit organization that operates 2,500-mile, middle-mile fiber optic network throughout our southern and southeastern Virginia, and a unique fiber route between Richmond and Hampton roads, of Route 460 and Route 10 corridor. MBC is celebrating their 20th anniversary for providing wholesale transport, dark fiber, and co-location to telecom carriers, ISPs in this area. So congratulations, Tad. A fun fact about Tad is he wrote, and this is before President Williams met Myra, is actually 1984, he wrote a paper called The Hacker Syndrome. So hacker syndrome in middle school. That paper actually, 15 years later, Google found through their search algorithm, and you can actually find that in a server in Netherlands, and you can Google it now if you want to. So a lot of foresight there, Tad. Next, we have Reverend Nelson of Henrico County Board of Supervisors. He's been serving his 4th term on the Henrico County Board of Supervisors, and currently he's the chair. So when I moved here 12 years ago to take a job at CarMax, I moved my family from Boston to Henrico County. And this is the place I lived the most in my entire life. I lived everywhere, but this is a place I call home. So I've been very happy resident of Henrico County. I think it's a very innovative county, and they've done a lot of great work. So Reverend Nelson, he serves as a board of directors for GRTC. He also serves he's a vice chair of Central Virginia Transportation Authority. He is a board of visitors at VCU. And because he's not that busy, he's also the pastor of the 6th Mount Zion Baptist Church. Now, interesting fact about Reverend Nelson is he plays weekly game of Monopoly with his friends on Sundays and have done so since 2007. Welcome, Reverend Nelson. Maybe you can teach us a thing or two about Monopoly. Next, we have Nick Blessing. He's the Director of Public Policy and Economic Development for QTS Data Center. I'm happy to say I'm a customer of QTS, very happy customer. Nick and his team focus on growing the QTS business by partnering with governments of all sizes to implement business-friendly policies and secure creative, differentiated economic development tools for QTS and his customers. Interesting fact about Nick is he and his wife had their first baby earlier this year, Wyatt, on January 15th. So congratulations, Nick. last but not least is Vince Barnett, a fellow golfer addict, I think golf addict. So Vince is the industry leader for data centers for Virginia Economic Development Partnership. He provides leadership and his data center expertise for wider benefit of the Commonwealth. He has been with VEDP since 2001 and served in different leadership roles and communications, marketing, and business investment. Besides golf, Vince also enjoys fishing, and he served in the United States Air Force and Virginia Air National Guard for several years. And his assignment was in Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany and Inkirtik, I'm not sure I'm saying it right, Air Base in Turkey. Thank you for your service, Vince. So for discussion today, first I'll spend a couple of minutes on a few slides to set the context, basically recap some of the conversation we already are having, and then really open up the dialogue with our esteemed panelists here, get their thoughts and perspectives on this incredible opportunity we have in front of us, and how well are we positioned to take advantage of that. So our digital port. First, let me introduce you to three numbers here. 2.6 trillion, 4.4 trillion, and 3.1 trillion. 2.6 trillion and 4.4 trillion represents the range of the economic growth potential from Gen AI activities annually. 3.1 trillion in comparison, just to set context, is the entire GDP for United Kingdom in 2021. So the growth that we're expecting to see is larger than the entire GDP for the United Kingdom. That's really the possibility. Now, what's even mind-boggling is that the growth potential, if we take in all the AI opportunities, not just the Gen AI, that number could be even more than double, that 2.6 to 4.4. So incredible opportunities. John already shared this slide this morning about the growth of data, the explosion, the exponential growth there, and that is really continuing, and that's only getting faster. It's a tremendous amount of data explosion that's happening that we all need to be ready for and take advantage of. If you look at how do you take advantage of this? How do we take part in this massive economic growth vehicle that's coming and that's in the middle of us right now? It's really about building a digital infrastructure hub, a digital infrastructure, and we talked about this in different terms, but ultimately what it is really building an ecosystem around digital economy that we can take part in. So digital infrastructure hub is not just data centers. Data center is a big component, and we'll hear from Nick this morning. It's also the power. It's also the bandwidth that we need to transport, and we'll hear from Tad on that. It's about the talent we need to run the digital infrastructure hub. It's about the economic policies, and we'll hear from Reverend Nelson this morning on that. So there's a great amount of, a lot of different components that have to come together to take advantage of this economic growth that's happening. And John talked about this morning, that we have made a lot of progress, but we have a lot of work still in front of us. So if you look at some examples, these are some of the big sort of global internet hubs or global infrastructure that exists today throughout the world. Richmond is not there right now. If you look at the individual areas or cities or groups or regions, we don't really show up on the radar as an internet hub. But if we combine our region between RVA and 757, we do show up. We have an incredible possibility and opportunity as a region to take part in this. I've been very fortunate and very grateful to be part of the RVA 757 effort, working with John and Greg and the team, because I'm very passionate about our region. I'm very optimistic about our region. I feel like we have a lot to offer. And having lived in many parts of the country and spent a lot of time in the Silicon Valley, I feel like we have a lot to offer that we are not doing probably as well as we should be. We're not getting the credit we should be, and we're not able to attract the talent we should be attracting. So very, very optimistic, very grateful that the RVA 757 team is working to make that vision a possibility and reality for us. So about a year ago, this conference, we opened up the first map, and it was fascinating. I was here in the middle of all of you to open up that big map, and since then, we have made a lot of progress. This is a picture of data centers in 2023, but if you look at it a year later, we have a lot more dots that's happening in our region. And it's because of a lot of the work that's done through leaders in this room and in our communities. A lot of excitement, a lot of momentum through, if you can look at some of the articles and headlines through Richmond Times-Dispatch and other magazines. And if you go further, data centers are paying a lot of taxes. That is supporting our communities in a big way. And they contribute very healthily. And I'll show a couple of the examples. If you look at the Loudoun County, $700 million a year. That's how much they're generating revenue through data centers. If you look at Prince William County, 100+ million a year. Then if you look at Hanover County, 40 million per year, but they're projecting to, in 20 years, it'll be $1.8 billion in tax revenue. So significant growth. And then Meta, we we heard from Kelly this morning, they're investing in our community. Thank you for your partnership. Meta, also a very happy customer and corporate partner with Meta. So it's growing in size and scope and impact. And then if you look at the latest on Henrico County, I think they've been very innovative. And the resident of Henrico County, I cannot thank enough the county leadership team for thinking forward and having a great vision and partnership. So a lot of exciting things happening there, and we'll hear from Reverend Nelson about that in a few minutes. So with that, I'd just like to basically open up with the panel, and because there's a lot to learn and hear from them in terms of what's happening in their respective industries and segments or the teams that they lead. First, I really want to start with Vince Barnett. Vince, Virginia is the home to the largest concentration of data centers. We saw this morning, Northern Virginia #1, and Richmond region, Southern Virginia is like number 10. So we're definitely making an impact in the global space. We are the data center alley. So can you please talk a little bit about how Virginia became #1 market in the world and any current trends in Virginia Economic Development Partnership that is experiencing that the I-64 Innovation Corridor Megaregion should consider as part of the digital port?
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be with you all today. As someone who was raised in Hampton Roads and has spent the majority of my adult life in the Richmond region, this mega region means a lot to me personally, and then in the role that I do in Southern Virginia on a daily basis. The mega region presents assets unlike no other around the globe. So kudos to John and Greg and the team on where we stand today. So how did Virginia become the #1 data center market in the world? There's many reasons, and I certainly don't have the time to go in great depth here, but I will say that it was certainly no accident. That's a key takeaway from this. While not always known or connected, the world loves the amenities and the conveniences and the entertainment and every other aspect that data centers play in our modern lives. And they don't always make the connection to that. Virginia's leaders back in the early 2000s certainly did. They recognized that it had the potential to be the backbone of the modern economy, and the growth potential that surrounded the data center were tremendous, and we did some intentional things, or I should say they did some intentional things. And I speak of that both at the state level and some of the local levels. So we were an early adopter of tailored incentives, business financial incentives to help attract the industry, and we can't understate that at all. We also benefited from our proximity to the DoD and some of the early internet companies, AOL and those kinds of things. The infrastructure and fiber and all that was to support the DoD, and AOL and others certainly benefited us. But those tax incentives were a key. We have a tremendous favorable business climate in general, taxes, reliable power utilities. All of those played a pretty significant impact into it. And then a number of local communities communities, Henrico, Loudoun, Prince William, many others, they created favorable tax climates. They created streamlined permitting programs and other attractive economic development programs to be able to help bring the industry into Virginia. And it's just really boomed. And I just want to reemphasize what was said this morning, and Shamim just mentioned this a second ago. So Northern Virginia, without doubt, is the largest market by far in the world. And the idea of the traditional data center alley, people really recognize that, but they don't always understand that this growth is happening. So this is part of the trends that I want to speak to. The growth is happening across the state. So if you exclude Northern Virginia, the rest of Virginia is still a top 10 data center market with its capacity. We at BDP are seeing projects looking at every corner of the state, from traditional data center alley to Southern Virginia to Central Virginia, Southwest Virginia, you name it. A couple of other key trends just to touch on is projects are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Probably no surprise with the slide that you saw with the growth expectations that are here. And that's pushing power and other infrastructure demands as well. So it is not uncommon for us to have gigawatt power requests for projects. And if you're not a power guru, which most of us are not, let me assure you, that's a lot of power. It's far more than the offshore wind farm, and it's equates to roughly that of a nuclear, some smaller nuclear power stations. And then I would also be remiss if, from current trends, I didn't touch on there certainly has been growing concerns expressed with some of the impacts and such, which is leading to innovation, and the industry responded from their end, as well as state leaders and others taking a look at things that we might be able to do to help mitigate that. Ultimately, it's competition has grown, and it's really important that we all embrace this industry if we're going to maintain our number one position.
Yep. That's a great point. The tax incentive is obviously an interesting approach that Virginia has taken over the years. I'm going to actually move to Reverend Nelson. Actually, again, as a resident of Henrico County, I'm very, very vested and curious to know, how did you come up with this great idea of partnership with the data center at track, so the data center companies and investments in the region, and how are you using that those data center revenue?
First of all, good morning. So I'm like, who would have ever thought that I'd be sitting on a panel, me and Nick sitting beside each other after the wars that we went through not too long ago. First, let me say this: I pastor a church, as shared, so I may have to leave. I have a funeral in Richmond at 1 o'clock, and I'm in a car, not a helicopter, so I have to get back to as a 96-year-old person that was a member of my church for almost 90 years, so important service. Data centers in the county, the conversation really started before I really knew what we were even doing. And our EDA leader, Mr. Romanella's in the back. We dropped the data center tax to 40 cents almost 10 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, right before Meta did its first project, which I think now they're on like the third rendition of work. And so the climate had already been created in Henrico for data centers to come. The challenge is and was and still is for us who are elected officials trying to balance the benefit financially of what data center tax revenue brings and the impact on the community. When you have strong advocacy from the environmental communities, et cetera, serious battle in one of our cases, over this. Now, what won me over was the revenue. And a couple of years ago, when the case first came to us to rezone for the use of data centers, I didn't really get the magnitude of it initially, and then we started having some opposition. But it was toward the end of last year, our county manager and I had a conversation one day, and he shared, you do know the impact if we approve this one case, what the real estate tax revenue would bring in from just this one case. Now we already had QTS and Meta, Bank of America, some other data centers, but this one case alone, we could do something that we've never done before. So we started throwing out ideas. And once I started seeing the numbers and the impact, it was hard to say no. Now, what Henrico is committed to doing, unlike some of the other localities in Northern Virginia, is not include this particular data center revenue in our general fund. And so we are trying to use whatever revenue comes from new data center projects to try to do some groundbreaking, trend-setting things. And that's how we fell on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. What we found out real quickly is that the housing market, and I don't need to tell you guys, that from 2020 alone, the median home price in Henrico was $287,000. And I think the interest rate was like 3.5%. So mortgage, $1,500, $1,600 just 4 years ago. 2024, fast forward, and thank God for the interest rate decline for homeowners. Interest rate was up to 6.78 when we did the research earlier this year. Median home price, $384,000, and mortgage is now $2,700. You combine that with increased rent for apartments, and many people who are working jobs that we depend on are boxed out of homeownership. And so we committed to dedicating $60 million, which is about $12 million a year over the next 5 years, toward working with a group called Partnership for Housing Affordability, nonprofit that we brought in to kind of manage the process, working with the development community. If you build communities, you include affordable housing, and what I like saying is making housing more affordable, because when you say affordable housing, people get a stigma, and we're not building subsidized housing. We're building homes and communities that we are working with the Maggie Walker Land Trust to buy down the cost of the home by owning the land, and the homeowner owns the home, which in some cases knocks $100,000 off the house. And so I can do more. We incentivize the builders by not doing connection fees, waiving permits, etc. But they've got to do affordable housing in their communities. And our hope is 150 to 200 or more homes that we are making more affordable every year. So that's where we landed. And if we can do that with every project that comes forward, then we will be able to drop the real estate tax in our community. We will be able to do some other game-changing things for the people that live in our community.
That's wonderful. I'll be looking to lower tax bill maybe, but great. Thank you for sharing that.
Maybe if I could add to
yeah,
that. I would agree with all of that. I would maybe just dispute one point, Reverend Nelson, because in my view, I thought it was the very charming, articulate economic development director that helped to get the project over the finish line.
We did it in spite of the very charm.
I think that speaks to the leadership of the board. Regardless, the other component I wanted to add to that is, data centers, while yes, there are tax revenue elements to them, they are unique partners for communities. And not immense amount of tax revenue, but they don't add an immense amount of cars to the road. They don't add an immense amount of need in public school funding or in housing. And so there's a natural synergy and partnership there that I think the industry and a lot of these communities at large have really lauded as a triumph. The other thing that I would add, at least from my perspective as an operator from a long time in Henrico, QTS actually refurbished the old Cumanda semiconductor plant. And that became the basis for our data center development there. Even in the early engagements there, well over a decade ago, the county provided consistent, predictable, accommodating leadership. And that predictability, when you think about the trillions of dollars, Shamim, that you include on the slides there, those are really, really large, lofty numbers, but we have to keep in mind the companies that are making those investments, like a QTS or a Meta or a Google or an AWS, those are long-term investments. And having a partnership, having people you can trust and have a real dialogue with and work collaboratively with is an intangible. And I think that's something that in particular BDP and the County of Henrico have brought to bear.
30 seconds. I may not be able to speak anymore. So QTS and Meta, I know Meta at least 10 years now, QTS even before that. Construction jobs are abundant, but then the jobs that are created afterwards are really good, high-paying jobs. And those persons become a part of our community. And both of those companies, I do want to shout them out for their reinvestment into our communities and have been really good partners. And so we haven't had any issues from either as it relates to impacts on the community in a negative way, other than mud on the road while they're constructing.
Yep. I love the creativity and out-of-box thinking. I mean, to solve problems, that's the best way to approach it, because the traditional way of looking at things not going to always work. So I really love the partnership and the conversation there. I'm going to actually turn to President Williams now. In a couple of years ago, at CarMax, we're growing our digital talent. I was hiring a lot of people, and I actually, regretfully, had to go outside of Richmond region because I felt like I hired most everybody I could hire with analytics and cybersecurity and all those engineering talent. And we had to open an office in one of the regions that John shared this morning was in Dallas. We have a small satellite office there, but my preference is always to hire locally and find the talent here. So the question for you, President, is that how key is the investment in digital infrastructure to the continued relevance and growth of colleges and universities?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invite to the panel and to talk about this topic in particular, one I'm very passionate about. I tend to, based upon my background, many years in the military, I retired as the director for something called the Defense Logistics Agency, which provides global logistics. I spent a few years at Leidos, a year of those 2 years in the UK doing a special project, and then on to Hampton University so I bring a slightly different perspective academically. And so I look at it both as higher education as an industry, and then the whole talent development and production piece. Now, the part about higher education as an industry. One of the things that I'm a huge advocate of is the fact that when you take the combined resources of all of the wonderful higher education institutions here in the Hampton Roads, look at the jobs they produce, the research dollars that they bring in, the collective money that the Commonwealth of Virginia spends, especially on our state-run institutions, and the fact that each one of them alone is $1 billion, $2 billion, $500 million business. This whole issue of cybersecurity is as much about the education as an industry as it is about the product that it produces. And so on the industry side of it, I would say this investment that's happening in Hampton Roads could not be more timely. And so as I look at the infrastructure at Hampton University, and I would argue the other universities in this room, or same challenges. You can do everything you can to increase the fiber optic cables, the underground sea cables, and so forth. You can bring it to our doorstep, but then each one of us has a funding challenge that we need to actually access it on our campuses. And so fortunately, we've been able to work with Cox Communications in this case to increase the input, the bandwidth to our campus, and we have now invested to now take advantage of that capability on our college campuses. Now to the issue of the talent that it produces. Look, it's not my words. We had a great briefing a little bit earlier about the dearth of capability in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence and the need for more jobs, not jobs, but people to fill those jobs from now into the future. At our university, and I suspect at many others, it is one of the fastest growing majors. The number of students that we got in this year's freshman class is probably almost double what we got just 2 years ago. And so I think there is an understanding by students that this is one of the hottest majors, and everything around data science is a job that will eventually, is a skill that will actually land you a job, a very well-paying job, and one that will last well into the future. And so again, I look at it both as higher education as an industry and the investments that are being made to maximize the effectiveness of that industry. And I look at it also as the talent that's being produced in cybersecurity and in data science.
Yeah, I love how you're looking at this more holistically, and I'm very happy to hear that there's such a great interest from the students in this major, and they understand the importance and the possibilities with this major. So thank you for sharing that and your leadership there. I'm going to move to Tad to briefly talk about, we can have the best infrastructure or data center or have the talent event, but they all need to be connected. And MBC has 2,500 mile, middle mile or fiber network. It's really impressive. What are you doing to serve the communities and make sure that the digital divide that exists in our communities, we can improve that. So can you talk a little bit more about what is MBC's mission and especially activities in our region that you're excited about?
Sure, thank you, and we're super excited to be as part of this panel. We're headquartered in South Boston, Virginia, so I like it when y'all did the big Megaregion and just swung it out far west. We appreciate that, being part of it. But yeah, when we started our network back in 2004, the biggest issue we had in our rural areas was that problem of connectivity. And without connectivity, you can't get competition, and businesses ended up paying, and God, if y'all have been on these things before, probably heard me say this 20 times, but some businesses were paying $8,000 a month for T1 lines. Anybody remember what a T1 line is? About a megabit and a half. If I still have DSL, that's about the speed. So we were really challenged to create an open access network that solved those problems, right? Create the big pipes in the rural communities where it made absolutely no sense for a private sector company to do that because there's no return on it. So we were fortunate to get some grants from the Virginia Tobacco Commission, some federal organizations or entities, and created this open access network as a nonprofit organization to help solve that in about 24, 25 communities. Built it 2004 to 2006, and thankfully it worked. The concept that we've been able to put together, again, working with a lot of important carriers to bring that connectivity, bring that competition into market. And what was fascinating is in 2010, about 2010 timeframe, you had one of the large data centers come to Southern Virginia. We appreciate VEDP. We could tell some stories over happy hour about how that came together, but just the passion about, you're not going to North Carolina, you are gonna come to Southern Virginia, and this is how we're gonna make it happen. Just paying out massive dividends for our little rural area to make that happen. Fast forward a few years from that, you see Virginia Beach with the subsea cable landings that came in. That wasn't because Virginia Beach was that exciting. It was because they needed to get to Southern Virginia. They needed alternative access points to land in the East Coast, and Virginia Beach was perfect for it. And now you can see other cables continuing to come into Virginia Beach, driving that connectivity. And then the real amazing part of helping drive the Megaregion and the 757 region together is that diversity, physical diversity of fiber cables from Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Hampton Roads area into Richmond, connecting to the QTS facilities and others, and then further into Ashburn, Virginia with existing networks, things like that. That's a game changer. So when you think about connectivity, I appreciated VDOT's showing what the new lanes were going to do. So I thought maybe the easiest way to visualize this is today, at least the cables that we know of, you've got a fiber cable that is about 144 lanes wide. Think of it as an interstate highway. Each of those lanes represent an individual fiber strand in that cable. Each strand of that cable could carry 1 million CarMax cars, and that's just 1 terabit. 20 terabits gets you 20 million CarMax cars you can put on a single lane, and they can go back and forth between Hampton Roads and Richmond, I think milliseconds. Neka, you can correct my math if I'm wrong, I'm gonna nerd out a little bit. But it's like 200 times in a second. So the capacity that we've been able to generate just off of cables on the 64 corridor, the Route 460, and Route 10 is just amazing. To see that, you have off-ramps where you can connect the local communities, but the big carriers, the big data centers can get from point A to point B on something that really didn't exist a long time ago. But because those investments were made, both from the private sector, I think MFN, Cox has a bunch of network, Lumen, a lot of our carriers have that, and the investments that we've made, that helps that whole region grow that ecosystem, and that's the amazing part. So we would have thought 10 years ago, 144 fibers is massive. We'll never use that much. Well, jump forward 2021, we are now putting cables in the ground on our backbone system, 432 fibers and 864 fibers, if you can believe those numbers. And the nominal cost to go from 144 fiber to an 864 fiber is just a few dollars a foot. And the construction costs obviously cost a lot more than it did 10 years ago. But just seeing that capacity and what the hyperscale data center operators and just the general use of internet bandwidth is driving, it's a very exciting time to be in this region because you're very well set with that type of connectivity. And then on top of all that, you've got the Southside Networks Authority that has tied all the cities and the localities together. They're working on some very exciting things. You've got the Global Links data center here in Virginia Beach that has that capacity to move things forward and provide that connection. So it's a great way to put all those things together, and seeing how fiber is just a little story of that. When we talk about exciting, hard to get excited about fiber maybe, but there's this thing called the Beach Route. This is a new initiative that was launched earlier this year by one of our customers, Windstream Communications. And this is a route that we've collaborated with several other carriers who have their own networks, tied those networks together, and now you have a route that stretches from Miami, Florida, to Jacksonville, to Myrtle Beach, to Raleigh, into Emporia in Virginia, Richmond and Ashburn, and also with the connectivity into Virginia Beach. So they're marketing that globally. It's really exciting for carriers to be able to, instead of having to work with 5 different companies, they can work with a single company, acquire dark fiber or acquire lanes on the highway for that particular service. And that's really maybe a game changer for the region, but it's certainly getting out the global connectivity, talking about the beach route and what that means for Hampton Roads and Richmond. So really exciting stuff going on in the industry.
Maybe an opportunity to expand the metaphor and put it in context, right? So we've talked about roads, which is, I love that, by the way. We talked about trails, and we talked about rail. So let's take the rail metaphor for a moment, right? During the Industrial Revolution, the one technology that determined winners and losers was where the trains went, right? The change now that we're seeing is it's not necessarily the physical economy. When we're operating in today's modern digital economy, it is the transport of ideas, intellectual property. And having those roads, the rail that we're talking about with this connectivity and the processing ability with data centers and the international connectivity, which, by the way, those transatlantic lines are the largest capacity, lowest latency to Europe today. That's a really unique recipe to then make this a new train depot, right, along the modern digital revolution. And so an interesting aspect to keep in mind for us, and I think to Tad's point, I think it's going to create a lot of opportunity.
So Nick, staying with you here a little bit, we talked before the session that QTS is the global leader in infrastructure and data center services, and we have a big part of that in our Commonwealth. So two points. One is what is making us an attractive place for data, your business, for example, and what could you be doing more to make it even more attractive, so a bigger piece of the pie?
I think that's a question that could probably have its own separate hour for.
Yes.
I think, but the representation here on the panel, I think, is very representative of the different elements, right? We need public-private partnerships at all levels of government, state and local. We need partners from connectivity and from infrastructure, from our utility partners, right? We need to have workforce and partners who support the overarching ecosystem, whether it's the folks who are programming or developing these applications or ensuring that they are secured, encrypted, and assured from outsider threats. So, when we look at the marketplace, it is a global marketplace, and data centers continue to compete not only domestically or internationally, but many times QTS competes against its own portfolio. I could have a customer come to me and say, Nick, we need a proposal for 3 locations across the country. Can you show us what you have, where? And that's me competing against myself, as well as my competitors, as well as my customers, who, by the way, can often build their own buildings. So what can we do is we can make sure that the foundations are set, right? The good work that the state of Virginia and the county of Henrico have done for years, I think, are the fundamental elements of how we continue to make marketplaces attractive. Investing in labor, investing in infrastructure, investing in good policy, investing in the partnerships, all of the benefits outside of the 4 walls of the data center, outside of the tubes, I think are the things that really make a community, a state, receptive to this type of development. I mean, what Casey was talking about earlier, and Casey, this is my public plug, that don't leave, I'd like to get a business card. I think what you're doing to create access to these type of technologies, to these industries, is also very important. As Vince is talking about, the data center industry is a relatively new industry. We're talking about 10, 12, 15 years ago. I mean, our resident IT historian here, Joe Hines, sent his first email in 1988. That's not that long ago, right? And so when you think about the advent of cellular, 5G, the Internet of Things, right? Everyone has a cell phone. I have 2 cell phones. Some of you have smart fridges, right? If you call in Uber, hitting a single button, one user interaction begets a multitude of computer-to-computer interactions which have to take place in a data center. Creating awareness and access to those technologies, getting people excited about fiber like the beach route, is the first really critical step so that we can be informed, we can be collaborative, we can create policy, we can create partnerships, and all of those things create the foundations that make Virginia successful and make the Megaregion successful.
That's awesome. I mean, it gets me really inspired and excited. And I know we have little tight on time. What I'd like to do is really have some questions from you, from the audience. And if you have any question for Reverend Nelson, that'd be good, because he does have a hard stop, as you heard. So if you have any question for him, let's ask that first, and then we'll continue for a few more minutes with our rest of the panel. So any question for Reverend Nelson from the audience?
Good morning.
Good morning.
We hot? Yep, hot mic, okay. For really anybody, regarding the cables coming into Virginia Beach from Europe and from South America, if I recall correctly, what are the opportunities for entrepreneurs and municipalities to monetize that in more of a micro or kind of a ground level? If anybody could respond to that, thank you.
I will start and hopefully provide something that resonates with you. It's not too unlike any other industry ecosystem. So there are direct supply chains that feed into the data center market and this global digital port economy that we're talking about. So there's opportunities for small businesses to become part of that. You know, people often think of data centers as correctly often think of data centers as these incredibly innovative technology solutions, which they are, but there's also things in there, racks and you know, I've heard a recent stat that plumbing, the pipe fitters and those kinds of things, that the tremendous needs that support inside the walls of a data center. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to tie it directly to the subsea cables that are coming here that are critically important, but as this economy grows and we have additional data centers and additional support services that locate around them from HVAC to everything else, there's opportunity for you as a small business provider to become part of that industry and supply chain that's necessary to support the overall economy or overall data center. Nick, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think specific to the cable itself, I might need to defer to Tad, though I don't know if he's going to want to encourage competition. You know, my mind goes to maintenance, right? So you should Google, go onto YouTube and look at how they actually drop these cables. It's fascinating, but once they're there, they actually need to continue to be maintained, right? It's a dynamic environment when it is subsea. It's always moving, shifting. So I would say from a supply chain or support from a municipal perspective, there are likely some operations or maintenance style needs for those lines once they're deployed.
Great. Any? Yep, right there.
You know, the conversation about subsea cables is really, really important, and I don't know in Virginia if we really recognize it. Global Link's data centers in Virginia Beach today has 3 subsea cables, preparing for an additional 4 cables, which will give Global Links a total of 7, which will be more than anyone else on the Eastern Seaboard at over 2,000 terabits per second. And I think as you talk about how can it meet the needs of various types of organizations, I think subsea cables is the key. And I think coming off the shore of Virginia Beach, offering the lowest latency, I think this is a great benefit for bringing technology companies in and helping us to retain some of that education that starts in Hampton Roads and in our region and then too often goes abroad. I think with these subsea cables and what they can do, I think it's a real game changer for us. And I think the more that we invest in trying to understand what these cables offer will really be the game changer and the benefit for Hampton Roads.
Thank you. I appreciate that comment because my question was going to be related to technology. So basically, I understand all the benefits, the economic, the workforce development, housing, and improving quality of life. We have not talked about the role of energy consumption and data center, which is what we understand. That's why we are here. There's also talk about technology continue to evolve. What does the panel have to say about generally what can technology do to help improve and reduce energy grid? We don't have enough energy to have data centers operation.
I think that one's probably for me. I think, Shamim, your question for me previously could have taken 1 panel. This could probably take 2. It's a large topic, but suffice to say that there is an immense amount of effort going on across the country, including at the federal level, to study, understand, and prepare for the next evolution of what our grid looks like, right? The grid is the goal because ultimately that serves all users, and our goal for everyone should be able to be producing clean, reliable, stable, affordable power for everyone. I probably just took Bob Blue's speech, but I think it's apt, right? The other element that I think you should keep in mind from a data center perspective is that data centers are inherently incentivized to be the most efficient users of their resources, period. my business model as a co-location data center is to lease to infrastructure companies, internet companies. Those companies are not going to buy a wildly inefficient product, right? My largest expense are those things that we're talking about: power, water, land. And so from a business perspective, the goals of any business are to minimize costs and increase revenues. Well, our costs are aligned with our resources. So again, we are inherently incentivized to use those resources as efficiently as possible. And what we're seeing as we partner with our utility partners across the country and DOE at the federal level is we're seeing this renewed interest in how do we enable private dollars to go to work for the public good. And that could take place in behind the meter or in front of the meter solutions where we are helping to develop new carbon neutral or renewable generation assets that not only go to support our projects, but the community at large. And so when I say the grid is the goal, we have an opportunity with this infrastructure to provide public benefit, right? Fiber connects people. Data centers facilitate that compute. But the other element, though, is that they are parts of communities and they can help to support it. The last example, I'm sorry, I'm kind of droning. The last example is that some of this has already taken place. Several years ago, there was a massive freeze in West Texas where all of the wind turbines kind of stopped, right? Well, data centers have dispatchable capacity. In that instance, in Texas, ERCOT has a program called a demand response program. And in that instance, they said, hey, you know what? We're going to call on our data center partners to run off of their dispatchable power so we can reroute the grid to provide power to several thousand homes and keep them online while our intermittent renewables aren't accessible. That's another example, I think, of data centers and infrastructure providing partnership and opportunity well outside the four walls of the building. And I think it's going to take an all-of-the-above approach for us to have conversations much like this so we can be collaborative and intentional to improve those resources and infrastructure that we all rely on. Thank you.
Vince, a quick question for you, really related to that. You know, the JLARC, the work they're doing, the study around data center for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Can you, is it related to this? How data centers are being deployed within the Commonwealth, and anything about power or anything else you can share?
Sure. For those of you who are not familiar, JLARC, which is the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee, they're the help to audit state agencies, programs, and those kinds of things for the General Assembly. They're currently looking at a very broad-based study on data centers, which will be published in December, I believe December 9th to be exact. A couple of quick things about that. First, JLARC provides recommendations, not legislation. So for those of you that are interested in this, I would encourage you to monitor that closely. And when the recommendations come out, get involved, work with your state leadership, help to find solutions. Economic development, and it is a little bit of a sidebar, economic development, we preach all the time that it is a relationship business, and it is very true in this particular sector. So Nick did a good job of talking about all the various partnerships. It takes a lot to make this happen. So on the JLARC side, they had a tremendous lift. I saw Chris Lloyd in the room earlier. He could probably give you the exact number, but there were dozens of bills that were proposed in the last legislative cycle that touched on data centers, and most of that was rolled up into the study. So there are 4 primary areas that they are looking at. The first is how the industry is growing, and particularly how it's going to grow in Virginia. Second is related to energy. Energy is going to be a big piece of it. Nick said it very well. Again, it's technology, so these folks are innovating on a daily basis, and it is in their best bottom line interest to be as efficient as they can. In addition to that, with some of the more recent concerns that have come about, JLARC's looking at some of that from natural resources, historical resources, and others. And then I believe lastly, they're going to do a cost-benefit analysis to understand the benefits that are brought both at the state and local level, and how Virginia can continue to compete in this market with a particular interest on outside of NOVA.
Great.
Okay, we have time for one more question right here.
Hi, I'm curious how our digital infrastructure is being protected against natural disasters, especially in an area that's prone to sea level rise and subsidence. And does that fall to the responsibility of the municipalities? Are you doing anything to mitigate that, or is that entirely on the companies themselves?
Yeah, as a fiber operator, we try to bury fiber where we can, usually 3 feet within VDOT right-of-ways, so that protects from storm damage and other issues. Some places you do have aerial spans where it is susceptible to high wind events or icing events or outages, but I think, which is why we have multiple routes and diversity for that. If we can just speak to what happened in North Carolina this week, a lot of that was aerial cable in the mountains because it's very difficult to build underground fiber and rock and very expensive. And we have a route to Atlanta that there's about 3 miles of road and cable that are just missing. It just disappeared with the floods. So we're not really sure when that's gonna come back. But yeah, putting that fiber underground is a big part of that. Also putting generators in node sites, having that capacity. I know data centers, you've got multiple levels of redundancy. So even if, God forbid, hurricanes come this way, you're not going to experience those outages that you would typically have because they're able to kind of self-contain that for that infrastructure.
President Williams, you have a couple of comments?
Yeah. So, realizing that we have just a few minutes, I think it's appropriate to kind of close the session again with talking about the education that's going to be required to make all of this happen. All of that education is occurring inside of our institutions of higher education. And I see 2 or 3 broad things that must be taken into account. So one is talent. Right now, there simply is not enough talent. And we will have to find ways in our junior colleges, our 4-year institutions. Many universities are now also offering micro-credentialing in very specific areas that are related to data science, data centers, and anything related to cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. And so these are all ways that we will have to, all things we'll have to do to upscale this new emerging marketplace. So talent is number 1. The next one is continued investment in our infrastructure. And so if I look on most college campuses now, most are moving away from, example, book libraries. Now, when most of us went to school, you went to a book library. Most are now transforming into digital libraries. And so most of our classrooms are now becoming smart classrooms. Most of our laboratories on campus are becoming smart laboratories. Most of our research involves more and more data. But we must transform the digital infrastructure of the campus in order to be able to handle these new requirements. And it all is around data. And so there's an emerging trend, I think, within higher education that this whole project is going to help Virginia with. And that emerging trend is that I think academic institutions in the future are going to be defined by this ability to access data. And those states and those regions that have the ability to give their academic institutions access to reliable and fast data will gain an advantage. So what we're doing here in this region is positioning our academic institutions as an industry to maintain a competitive advantage. And then the last thing I would say is I talked about upgrading existing facilities. It's also getting new infrastructure. And so by that I mean it's not just physical infrastructure. Many of our universities right now may have a strong data science program in computer engineering, or they may have a strong program in artificial intelligence and computer science and what have you. What's really emerging is this need for cross-educational collaboration with business, with other programs across the institution itself. And so as I look at data science and artificial intelligence, it doesn't just apply to one area. It's across the entire institution. Artificial intelligence will impact every single one of our majors. And so The only way to keep pace with that change is to stay connected with and embedded with industry, because our curricula has to change at the speed of relevance. This will continue to evolve, and if you have a static curricula, you will not be able to keep up with the change that's occurring. And so those are some trends, I think, on the academic side that are going to be important, in addition to providing the talent that's needed to fuel this data science and cybersecurity engine. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been an exciting panel. As you can tell, we have a lot to discuss. This is the beginning of a conversation, not end. Tremendous momentum in our region. A lot of great work, but we have a lot of work ahead of us. You know, I've been in this industry for 30 plus years. This has been the most exciting time ever. I don't think, it's my wildest dream that we'd be in this shape right now globally in terms of technology and innovation. So there's huge potential, but we have to work on it to earn it. So I really appreciate all of you joining us for this conversation, and let's continue the discussion. And let's give a big round of applause to my esteemed panel here.
And to you.
Thank you.
All right, so